Warning: do not listen to this alone, especially if you live near trees. Deep in the forests of Russia and Eastern Europe, where birch trees stretch endlessly beneath a sky that darkens too quickly, there are places locals refuse to map, trails that twist in unnatural loops, clearings that seem to shift overnight, and somewhere beyond the reach of road signs and satellite signals, there is said to be a hut that does not rest on soil but on legs. Not wooden posts, not stone pillars, but enormous, clawed chicken legs that scratch and pivot in the dirt as if alive, turning slowly to face whoever dares approach. This is not a fairy tale told to children for comfort. This is a warning embedded into Slavic folklore for centuries. Her name is Baba Yaga. In Russian oral tradition, she is described as an old crone with iron teeth, a nose so long it scrapes the ceiling of her hut, and fingers thin as twigs, yet strong enough to snap bone. She flies not on a broomstick like Western witches, but inside a massive mortar, propelling herself through the air with a pestle, sweeping away her tracks with a broom made of silver birch. And unlike typical villains, Baba Yaga is not simply evil. She is unpredictable. She may devour you. She may test you. She may grant you impossible wisdom. But if you enter her forest unprepared, she will decide your fate. Historians trace the legend of Baba Yaga back to pre-Christian Slavic mythology, where she appears as a liminal figure, neither fully demon nor fully deity, but something older, something connected to the wilderness itself. In ancient villages, scattered across what is now Russia, Ukraine, Poland, and Belarus, the forest was not scenery. It was survival and death intertwined. Wolves moved silently beneath the trees. Winters swallowed travelers whole. Children who wandered too far did not return. In that environment, Baba Yaga became the embodiment of the forest's will, a guardian of thresholds, a predator of the lost. Folklorists note that her hut, balanced on chicken legs, rotates constantly, sometimes facing away from visitors until commanded to turn. The ritual phrase recorded in traditional tales is chillingly specific. Hut, hut, turn your back to the forest and your front to me. Without this phrase, the door cannot be reached. Without knowing the rules, entry is impossible. But what makes episode 6 different from simple folklore retelling is this. Sightings of Baba Yaga did not remain confined to medieval storytelling. Even in the 19th and early 20th centuries, rural communities in Siberia and Eastern Europe recorded strange encounters in deep woodland areas. Reports of elderly women living alone in remote cabins, surrounded by animal bones arranged deliberately in fences, skulls mounted on posts, strange symbols carved into tree bark. Travelers described stumbling upon huts that appeared abandoned until smoke began rising from chimneys moments later. Some claimed the structures looked as though they had shifted position when viewed from a distance. Paranormal researchers analyzing regional archives found recurring themes: disorientation, time distortion, the sensation of being watched from above, and the distinct smell of earth and decay thick in the air. In one 1932 account from a logging settlement in western Russia, 3 men reportedly ventured into a restricted forest zone, locals called grandmother's territory. They were searching for lost livestock. Only one returned. His testimony, preserved in fragmented notes, claimed they encountered a clearing where a wooden hut stood raised slightly above ground level, supported by something he refused to describe clearly. He said the air felt heavy, as if sound itself was muffled. His companions approached, despite his hesitation. He remembered hearing a grinding noise, like wood scraping against bone, and then the hut slowly rotated. He ran before seeing what turned it. The other 2 men were never found. Official reports blamed wolves, but wolves do not rotate houses. Anthropologists argue Baba Yaga served as a cautionary figure, teaching children to respect nature's boundaries. But that explanation weakens when modern hikers and urban explorers report eerily similar phenomena. In 2008, a group of documentary filmmakers exploring a forested region near the Ural Mountains recorded disorienting compass malfunctions and GPS interference while attempting to locate an abandoned cabin rumored to resemble descriptions from folklore. Their footage shows trees arranged in unnaturally symmetrical arcs, as if guiding them into a central point. Audio captured faint rhythmic thuds echoing through the woods. When reviewing the material later, one frame briefly displayed what appeared to be a vertical wooden structure elevated slightly off the forest floor before the camera glitched. The team dismissed it as lens distortion, yet none of them could explain why their exit path took nearly 4 hours when the entry trail required less than 40 minutes. Baba Yaga's most terrifying attribute is not her appearance, is her role as a gatekeeper. In traditional tales, those who survive her trials often undergo transformation. She assigns impossible tasks, sorting grains from dirt overnight, surviving in darkness without fire, answering riddles tied to life and death. Success grants passage. Failure results in consumption. Some folklore scholars believe she represents initiation, the brutal crossing from childhood into adulthood, but others suspect something darker, because in nearly every version, the forest around her hut is described as alive. Trees lean inward, roots shift, the ground feels unstable, as if the land itself collaborates with her. And then there are the bones. Nearly every classical depiction includes fences constructed from human bones, skulls mounted on spikes, with eye sockets glowing faintly at night. Some interpret this as symbolic exaggeration. Others believe it reflects older Slavic burial customs, where bones were exposed after decay. But what if the imagery is memory, rather than metaphor? Archaeological digs in remote Eastern European woodlands have uncovered isolated bone clusters arranged in deliberate circular patterns, far from known settlements. Official explanations range from ancient ritual sites to animal disturbance, yet the symmetry is difficult to ignore. The most unsettling element of Baba Yaga is her ambiguity. She is not purely malevolent. She may help the worthy. She may guide the desperate. In some tales, she aids heroes who show humility and courage. But the price of approaching her remains unclear. Unlike spirits bound to vengeance, Baba Yaga seems bound to balance. She tests, she evaluates, she decides. And once you enter her forest, you are no longer governed by ordinary rules. Directions reverse. Sounds travel incorrectly. Light dims too early. Modern survival experts acknowledge that dense forests can create powerful psychological effects: spatial disorientation, auditory hallucinations, heightened paranoia. But folklore insists those sensations are not random. They are signals. Warnings that you have crossed into her domain. Imagine walking alone beneath towering birch trees as dusk falls faster than expected. The path behind you looks unfamiliar. The air carries a faint scent of smoke, though no fire is visible. Somewhere ahead, you hear a slow, grinding creak. Not mechanical, organic, like joints shifting under weight. And through the trunks, you glimpse something: elevated wood against shadow. The structure turns slightly, not enough to confirm what supports it, just enough to make you question whether it moved at all. That hesitation is the threshold, because Baba Yaga does not chase like a predator. She waits. She allows you to enter willingly. In Slavic languages, the word Baba can mean grandmother. Yaga has disputed origins, some translated to horror, illness, serpent, or pain. Grandmother of dread, grandmother of the forest. An ancient archetype rooted so deeply in Eastern European consciousness that even modern cinema struggles to portray her without diluting her complexity. She is older than the stories written about her, older than the villages that whispered her name, possibly older than the forests themselves. And here is the question Episode 6 will investigate. Is Baba Yaga merely a cultural symbol born from humanity's fear of wilderness? Or is she something else, a consciousness tied to old-growth forests, manifesting wherever ancient trees remain untouched? Because if she is bound not to country, but to wilderness, then she does not belong only to Russia. She belongs to any place where forests grow thick enough to swallow sound. Tonight, as you listen, consider how many forests remain unexplored. How many regions satellites cannot fully penetrate. How many cabins sit abandoned, unmarked, unrecorded. and if somewhere among them stands a hut balanced on clawed legs, slowly turning to face whoever approaches. The real terror may not be whether Baba Yaga exists. The real terror may be whether she is still testing those who wander too far from the path. Subscribe to Tales of the Dark, where every story gives you a nightmare. Warning: if you've ever felt lost in the woods, this part may explain why. In nearly every preserved Slavic account, Baba Yaga does not immediately devour those who enter her forest. She tests them, and the tests are never random. They are precise, psychological, and designed to expose weakness under pressure. Because the hut on chicken legs is not merely a dwelling, it is a threshold, and once it turns to face you, once the door creaks open, you have already stepped into a space where natural law thins. Traditional Russian folk tales recorded in the 18th and 19th centuries describe travelers arriving at her clearing after wandering in circles. Despite walking straight paths, as though the forest itself redirected them, and when the hut rotates, grinding against unseen joints, the first sensation witnesses report is not fear but heaviness, as if the air has thickened into something that resists breath. Surrounding the structure are fences made of bones, sometimes described as animal remains, sometimes unmistakably human, with skulls mounted atop posts, whose hollow eye sockets glow faintly at dusk, though no flame is visible. Scholars once dismissed this as symbolic exaggeration meant to frighten children. Yet excavations in remote Eastern European woodland regions have uncovered bone arrangements forming partial enclosures, far from known settlements, leaving archaeologists debating whether ancient ritual sites inspired the imagery, or whether the folklore itself shaped how communities interpreted isolated remains. When you enter the hut, if you are allowed to enter, you are not greeted with immediate violence. Instead, Baba Yaga assigns tasks, and these tasks follow a recurring pattern across centuries of storytelling. Sort a sack of mixed grains before sunrise, separate dirt from seed without light, weave cloth from impossible fibers, survive a night surrounded by whispering skulls without closing your eyes. At first glance, these appear metaphorical, representing discipline and resilience. But anthropologists studying initiation rites in Slavic cultures note striking similarities between these fictional tasks and real coming-of-age trials once practiced in rural communities, suggesting Baba Yaga's hut functioned as a mythologized testing ground where children symbolically died to childhood and emerged transformed. Yet this explanation fails to account for modern parallels. In 1996, a hiking pair exploring a dense region of forest near the Carpathian Mountains reported encountering what they believed to be an abandoned cabin elevated slightly above uneven ground, supported by thick, root-like structures. They described feeling disoriented long before reaching it, their compass needles spinning erratically despite fresh batteries, and as they circled the structure to photograph it, they noticed it appeared to shift orientation subtly between glances, as if rotating a few degrees at a time. Assuming dizziness or uneven terrain, they attempted to mark its position using GPS coordinates, but later found the recorded location placed them nearly half a kilometer away from where the cabin had been visible. And when they returned the following day with clearer minds, there was no cabin at all, only dense trees and disturbed soil forming a circular depression. Skeptics attribute such experiences to spatial disorientation, common in forests. Yet the rotational detail aligns disturbingly with centuries-old descriptions of Baba Yaga's hut pivoting on chicken legs. The psychological structure of her trials reveals something deeper than folklore. She does not simply test physical endurance, she targets moral instinct. In many tales, the protagonist survives only by showing humility, thanking animals for assistance, sharing food, refusing arrogance while those who boast or demand are consumed. This moral filtering suggests Baba Yaga operates not as chaotic evil, but as a judge of character, a force that evaluates intent rather than strength. But what happens when modern individuals raised without knowledge of ritual phrases or humility codes embedded in folklore stumble into her territory unaware of the rules? That is where contemporary accounts grow darker. In 2014, a Russian blogger investigating abandoned villages documented an overnight stay near a forest clearing rumored locally to be grandmother's circle, a name older residents avoided explaining. His footage later uploaded in fragmented clips shows him joking about Baba Yaga before entering a stand of birch trees, at which point audio anomalies begin, low rhythmic thuds resembling heavy wooden impacts against soil. Around 2:17 a.m., his camera captures a distant vertical silhouette, partially obscured by fog, elevated slightly off the ground. He approaches, but the frame glitches, and the recording cuts. He later posted that he felt overwhelming exhaustion and lost nearly 2 hours of memory. Viewers analyzing metadata found no evidence of editing, yet no follow-up exploration occurred. The hut's most iconic feature, the chicken legs, has been interpreted symbolically as a representation of movement between worlds. Bird imagery, often associated with shamanistic travel and ancient Slavic belief systems. Some historians argue the legs represent funerary structures raised above ground to protect bodies from scavengers, transforming burial platforms into mythic architecture. However, the grinding rotational detail described repeatedly across independent regions suggests something more kinetic, something that does not merely symbolize movement, but performs it. In several 19th century accounts, witnesses described hearing a creaking noise before seeing the hut, a sound compared to bones scraping against wood. Modern hikers reporting unexplained forest noises often describe similar grinding sounds without visible source. Coincidence remains plausible. Pattern remains undeniable. Then there is the mortar. Unlike Western witches flying on broomsticks, Baba Yaga propels herself through the sky inside a giant mortar, steering with a pestle and sweeping away tracks with a birch broom. Folklorists suggest this reflects ancient domestic imagery tools of grinding grain transformed into instruments of flight, but esoteric researchers propose the mortar symbolizes containment of human essence, grinding the soul down to its core. In darker retellings, victims placed within the mortars are reduced metaphorically before consumption, echoing ritualistic transformation myths where destruction precedes rebirth. Whether symbolic or literal, the consistency of these details across centuries suggests a narrative too stable to be random invention. And what of those who survive her trials? Traditional tales say they leave with knowledge, sometimes magical objects, sometimes simple wisdom. But modern alleged survivors report less tangible outcomes, heightened intuition, recurring dreams of forests, aversion to entering wooded areas alone, and a persistent sense of being evaluated from unseen vantage points. One Polish forest ranger anonymously shared on an online forum that after investigating reports of strange lights deep in protected woodland, he encountered a small clearing with bone-like branches arranged in fence patterns, and though he found no cabin, he felt compelled to speak aloud, the old phrase commanding a hut to turn. Nothing happened, yet the forest fell unnaturally silent for several seconds before normal sound resumed. He left immediately and refused to patrol that sector alone again. The trials of the bone hut are not always physical, sometimes they are temporal. Numerous encounter stories include missing time, minutes or hours unaccounted for, suggesting psychological dissociation or environmental stress. Survival psychologists acknowledge that fear, combined with isolation, can distort perception of duration. Yet, in Baba Yaga lore, time distortion functions as part of the test. Survive until dawn. Complete the task before sunrise. Endure the night. If time bends, the trial intensifies. Consider this possibility. Baba Yaga is not a singular being, but a forest-bound intelligence manifesting through archetype, using culturally recognized imagery to interface with human perception. The hut, the bones, the mortar. These may be symbolic skins worn by something older than Slavic myth, something that occupies dense wilderness and evaluates those who enter with unclear intent. This theory reframes her, not as a witch, but as a threshold guardian between civilization and untamed nature, enforcing boundaries humans forget to respect. Imagine standing before a hut that slowly pivots to face you, the door creaking open without wind, the scent of earth thick in your lungs, skull shapes lining a crooked fence whose eye sockets reflect no light source. Inside, a voice rasps not with rage, but curiosity, assigning you a task you do not understand. One you must complete before sunrise, without knowing what happens if you fail. You realize then that the forest is not silent, it is listening. And whether you believe Baba Yaga is myth, metaphor, or manifestation, one truth remains embedded in every version. Once the hut turns toward you, the trial has already begun. Subscribe to Tales of the Dark, where every story gives you a nightmare. Warning: if you've ever trusted a trail marker, you may want to rethink that. Forests do not need myths to be deadly, yet in regions stretching across rural Russia, Belarus, Poland, and the Carpathian Ranges, missing person cases cluster in ways that have unsettled both local authorities and independent researchers, particularly in zones long associated with Baba Yaga folklore. Dense woodland terrain, unpredictable weather, and navigational errors explain many disappearances, but certain patterns, repeated circular wanderings, equipment malfunction, witnesses describing sudden silence before vanishing echo, the oldest descriptions of her domain, where paths loop unnaturally, and the forest itself seems to reposition. In survival psychology, it is well documented that lost individuals often walk in circles, due to uneven stride length and dominant leg bias. Yet what unsettles investigators in several Eastern European cases is not circular movement alone, but reported spatial disruption. Survivors claiming landmarks appeared to shift trees arranged too symmetrically, clearings not visible on return trips. In 1978, two forestry students conducting plant surveys in a remote section near the Ural foothills radioed base reporting compass irregularities and a structure ahead not marked on maps. Before transmission cut abruptly, a search party located their equipment 3 days later, arranged neatly beside a shallow depression in the soil, as if placed deliberately, but no trace of the students was ever recovered. Official conclusions cited exposure and wildlife, yet the recovered notebook contained a final line scribbled repeatedly: "It turned." Authorities never clarified what that meant. Skeptics dismiss such fragments as coincidence layered with folklore influence, but the consistency of rotational imagery across centuries of Baba Yaga stories makes the word difficult to ignore. Modern search and rescue teams acknowledge that certain forest regions create acoustic anomalous temperature inversions, and dense canopy can bend sound waves, causing noises to appear displaced or distant. This may explain why multiple hikers across Eastern Europe report hearing grinding creaks echoing without visible source, a noise described not as metallic but organic, like heavy wood straining against joints. In archived folklore, villagers often heard the hut before seeing it, the scraping of its legs shifting position. Coincidence remains possible, yet repetition strengthens unease. In 2003, a Polish backpacker disappeared for 48 hours in a forested national park before re-emerging disoriented near a roadway kilometers from his last known location. He insisted he had walked in a straight line, following the sun, yet ended repeatedly in the same clearing, dominated by an unusual cluster of birch trees forming an almost perfect arc. Investigators attributed his experience to panic-induced disorientation. Yet he maintained there was a cabin beyond the arc, partially obscured, elevated slightly, and that each time he approached it, dusk seemed to fall prematurely. Medical evaluation showed dehydration and stress, but no hallucinogens. He refused further interviews and later moved away from the region. Anthropologists studying Slavic folklore argue that Baba Yaga's forest symbolizes psychological transition zones, centering adulthood, confronting mortality, facing isolation, but symbolic interpretations do not fully address modern testimonies of temporal anomalies. Numerous hikers report losing hours, despite minimal travel distance, watches stopping briefly before restarting digital timestamps, skipping seconds. Environmental factors like battery failure and cold exposure explain some irregularities. Yet the clustering of such reports in historically haunted woodland zones adds narrative gravity. In traditional tales, Baba Yaga often manipulates time. Tasks must be completed before sunrise. Nights feel impossibly long. Dawn arrives suddenly. What if the sensation of elongated dusk in modern encounters is the cognitive echo of that ancient motif? Then there are the bone circles. Archaeological teams across parts of Russia and Eastern Europe have uncovered isolated skeletal arrangements, sometimes animal, occasionally human, forming partial enclosures or arcs. While most are attributed to ancient ritual practice or scavenger redistribution, a few remain unexplained due to lack of nearby settlement evidence. Folklore depicts Baba Yaga's hut, surrounded by a fence of bones, crowned with skulls glowing at night. Perhaps early discoveries of such arrangements inspired the myth, or perhaps the myth preserved memory of something older, a pre-Christian woodland, right guarding sacred clearings. In 2018, drone footage captured by independent explorers in a remote Belarusian forest revealed a circular depression nearly 30 meters in diameter where vegetation grew in an unusual spiral pattern. Soil analysis later suggested natural causes, fungal networks altering growth, but viewers online quickly compared the formation to descriptions of grandmother's clearing, a term found in 19th century Slavic manuscripts, referencing forbidden woodland circles where travelers should not linger. Though the explorers found no hut, audio recorded faint, repetitive thuds at intervals too regular to attribute confidently to windfall. Skeptics cite woodpeckers or falling branches, yet the rhythm resembled weight shifting. Psychologists propose that expectation shapes perception. If individuals enter forests aware of Baba Yaga lore, their minds may amplify natural anomalies into narrative experiences. However, several modern accounts come from tourists unfamiliar with Slavic mythology, who later discovered the legend only after attempting to explain their encounter. A German hiker in 2011 described hearing a woman's raspy voice calling from within dense trees, offering directions that contradicted his map. He never saw her face but noticed an elevated wooden structure briefly through fog before losing sight of it. Upon recounting the story online, Slavic commenters flooded his post with references to Baba Yaga. He claimed he had never heard the name before. Forests possess documented effects on human cognition. Reduced visibility, repetitive patterns, and limited landmarks can trigger derealization. Yet Baba Yaga's myth persists, not merely because forests disorient, but because they judge. In folktales, those who enter with arrogance are consumed. Those who show humility survive. Modern survival training emphasizes calm patience, respect for environment, values mirrored in ancient moral coding. Perhaps Baba Yaga functions as cultural reinforcement of survival ethics, a myth ensuring people approach wilderness cautiously. But this rational explanation does not erase the lingering dread embedded in witness testimony, describing structures that appear and vanish, clearings that cannot be relocated, grinding noises with no visible source. Imagine walking through thick birch forest. As daylight thins unexpectedly fast, your compass needle trembling slightly, the path behind you no longer matching memory. Ahead through layered trunks, you glimpse wood elevated above uneven ground. You blink, and it shifts subtly, as if rotating to align with your approach. The forest quiets not gradually but abruptly, birds halting mid-call. You feel observed not from eye level but from something higher. Whether that sensation is ancient instinct, warning of predators, or something older, it presses against your spine like cold breath. Missing person databases across Eastern Europe list hundreds of unresolved cases tied to forest regions. Most are tragic, yet mundane accidents, exposure, wildlife. But folklore attaches itself to ambiguity, filling gaps where evidence thins. Baba Yaga thrives in those gaps, not because she is proven real, but because uncertainty gives her space. Every unexplained disappearance becomes potential validation. Every unexplained sound becomes her movement. What if Baba Yaga is less a singular witch and more the embodiment of the forest's selective memory? A consciousness emerging where trees grow oldest, preserving lessons through fear. Perhaps the hut does not stand permanently, but manifests when conditions aligned: bent canopy, isolation, vulnerability. Perhaps the grinding noise is roots shifting beneath soil. Perhaps the rotating illusion is your brain reconciling asymmetrical landmarks. Or perhaps, as Slavic elders once warned, the forest has a grandmother, and she still tests those who forget to respect her boundaries. Because in every version of the legend, one truth remains. Those who wander too deep are evaluated. Not all are taken, but all are measured. And if the forest around you ever feels too symmetrical, too quiet, too aware, you may already be standing in a clearing that does not appear on maps. Subscribe to Tales of the Dark, where every story gives you a nightmare. Warning: not every monster was meant to be called evil. By the time Christianity spread across Eastern Europe, many older Slavic deities and nature spirits were rebranded as demons, witches, or devils, their original roles distorted through centuries of religious reinterpretation. And some folklorists argue that Baba Yaga may be one of those casualties, a once revered forest guardian, reshaped into a child-eating crone. Early Slavic belief systems included powerful feminine entities tied to wilderness, fertility, death, and seasonal cycles. And unlike later Western witch archetypes, these figures were not purely malevolent. They were forces of balance, harsh yet necessary, embodying nature's indifference rather than cruelty. If Baba Yaga predates written folklore, she may have once symbolized the untamed forest itself, a matriarchal intelligence ruling the threshold between civilization and chaos. Her ambiguity supports this theory. In many tales, she aids heroes who approach respectfully, offering guidance, enchanted tools, or cryptic wisdom. She punishes arrogance and rewards humility, behavior more consistent with a gatekeeper or initiator than a predator. Ancient initiation rites across Eurasian cultures often involved symbolic journeys into wilderness, confronting death-like trials before emerging transformed. Baba Yaga's hut becomes a ritual chamber, her bone fence a boundary between childhood and adulthood, ignorance and knowledge. The mortars and pestle tools of grinding grain transform raw harvest into sustenance, mirroring the metaphor of breaking down the self to rebuild stronger. Even her iron teeth may symbolize inevitability, time consuming all things. But this elevated interpretation clashes violently with darker depictions. Some medieval Slavic texts describe her flying across the night sky in storms, her mortar leaving trails of wind that snap tree branches. Others portray her as skeletal, corpse-like, a being who smells of decay and feeds on the lost. These dual identities, giver of wisdom and devourer of flesh, suggests she is not a simple archetype, but a composite of older spirits merged into one enduring figure. Over centuries, oral storytelling may have fused multiple woodland entities into the singular name Baba Yaga, creating a myth large enough to absorb every fear associated with deep forest survival. Occult scholars propose a more unsettling possibility: that Baba Yaga is not bound to Slavic culture alone, but represents a recurring global archetype of the forest crone, appearing in different forms across civilizations. Hansel and Gretel's witch in German folklore, the Black Annies of English legend, even certain Siberian shamanic spirits. These parallels hint at a shared psychological template rooted in humanity's ancestral fear of wooded isolation. But Baba Yaga's rotating hut remains uniquely specific, a mechanical, almost anatomical detail difficult to dismiss as symbolic coincidence. What ancient structure inspired the image of a house that stands on legs and turns to face visitors? Some historians link it to elevated burial huts built by Finno-Ugric tribes, structures raised on wooden supports to protect corpses from animals. If villagers glimpsed such huts from afar, wind causing supports to creak, imagination may have animated them. Yet folklore insists the legs are not passive supports, but active limbs. In esoteric interpretations, the hut on chicken legs symbolizes liminality. Chickens scratch between earth and air, embodying threshold energy. The hut's rotation becomes a cosmic axis, turning between worlds. The forest around it functions as veil, and Baba Yaga herself becomes psychopompa, guide between life and death. In this reading, those who fail her trials do not simply die but transition, their bones joining the fence, not as trophies but as markers of passage. This aligns with ancient beliefs where bones were sacred, containers of spirit rather than waste. But modern retellings strip that nuance, emphasizing horror over symbolism, painting her solely as predator. Perhaps that shift reflects humanity's evolving relationship with wilderness. As forests shrank and cities expanded, the unknown retreated further from daily life, transforming once respected spirits into monsters of bedtime warnings. Yet even today, in remote villages of Russia and Eastern Europe, elders speak of Baba Yaga, not with theatrical fear, but cautious respect. She is referred to indirectly, rarely named after dark. Mushrooms gathered from certain forest patches are left untouched for grandmother, offerings of bread sometimes placed near tree roots during seasonal transitions. Whether these acts stem from lingering pagan custom or cultural inertia is unclear, but they suggest belief that the forest remains inhabited by something watching. Then there is the theory that Baba Yaga is not a single consciousness, but a mantella role, assumed by reclusive women living on forest edges throughout history. Widows, healers, herbalists, outcasts, accused of witchcraft may have been projected into the myth, their isolation exaggerated into supernatural status. During harsh winters, when food scarcity drove desperation, accusations of cannibalism or child harm could easily fuse into legend. Over generations, memory blurred into archetype. The witch in the woods became timeless. Yet this sociological explanation does not fully address persistent rotational hut accounts or modern disorientation experiences that echo ancient motifs too precisely to ignore. Some paranormal theorists push further, suggesting Baba Yaga represents a land-bound intelligence and egregore, formed by centuries of collective belief anchored to specific forest regions. Egregores, in occult theory, are thought entities sustained by shared focus. If enough generations feared and respected the forest through her image, perhaps that energy imprinted onto the land itself. Such an entity would not require physical permanence. It would manifest through perception, guiding, testing, and occasionally consuming in ways indistinguishable from natural hazard. The forest becomes her body, the hut her localized avatar. Imagine approaching a clearing where trees lean subtly inward, forming an almost architectural arch. Imagine sensing evaluation not from a visible figure, but from the arrangement of branches, the hush of birds, the pattern of roots beneath your boots. Perhaps Baba Yaga no longer needs a visible crone form. Perhaps the witch was only ever a mask placed upon something older and more diffuse. In that case, the hut turning to face you is not mechanical movement, but environmental shift, your perception aligning with an unseen axis of awareness. So what is Baba Yaga? A demon twisted by religious fear, a goddess fragmented by time, a symbolic initiation rite, a composite memory of reclusive forest dwellers, or a threshold intelligence anchored to wilderness older than recorded myth. Each theory holds fragments of truth. None fully dispelled the unease, because the legend persists, not through proof, but through resonance. Deep down, humanity understands that wilderness does not belong to us. We pass through it. It endures, and in that endurance, we project guardian scroll, wise, impartial. If she is guardian, her trials ensure respect. If she is, which her hunger ensures caution. If she is goddess, her presence ensures balance. But if she is something older, something that wears archetypes like clothing, then perhaps the bone hut was never meant to terrify children. Perhaps it was meant to remind adults that some places remain beyond control. And that leads to the final question episode 6 must confront. If Baba Yaga is tied to the forest itself, what happens as forests vanish? Does she fade? Or does she migrate? Subscribe to Tales of the Dark, where every story gives you a nightmare. Deep in the vast, dark forests of Eastern Europe, where sunlight struggles to pierce the dense canopy, a legend whispers through the rustling leaves. It's a tale told to children to keep them close to home, a story that has echoed through generations, evolving with each telling. This is the story of Baba Yaga. Now, when you picture a witch, you might think of a pointy hat and a broomstick, but Baba Yaga, she's something else entirely. She's ancient, her face a roadmap of wrinkles, her nose so long it sometimes touches the ceiling of her hut. She has iron teeth, perfect for grinding the bones of those who wander too far into her domain, and her sense of smell is legendary. She can sniff out a human from miles away. But what truly sets Baba Yaga apart is her home. Forget your charming little cottages. Baba Yaga lives in a hut that stands on a pair of giant, scaly chicken legs. This bizarre dwelling can run, spin, and dance through the forest, making it nearly impossible to find unless it wants to be found. When a traveler approaches, they must utter a specific incantation. Hut, hut, turn your back to the forest, your front to me. Only then will the hut creakily turn to reveal its door, a gateway to a world of both peril and potential reward. And how does she get around when she's not in her ambulatory home? She doesn't fly on a broomstick. Instead, she sits in a giant mortar, using the pestle as a rudder to steer herself through the air, and sweeps away her tracks with a silver birch broom. Imagine seeing that silhouette against the moonlit sky, a terrifying and truly unforgettable sight. The forest surrounding her hut is just as menacing. It's enclosed by a fence made of human bones, each post topped with a skull whose eye sockets glow with an eerie, spectral light. This isn't just for decoration. It's a clear warning to all who dare to approach. Stay away, or you might become the next addition to her grim collection. But here's where the legend gets complicated. Baba Yaga isn't just a simple villain. In some stories, she is a terrifying monster, a cannibal who preys on lost children and unsuspecting travelers. She sets impossible tasks for her captives, and failure means ending up in her oven, destined to become her next meal. These tales paint her as the ultimate boogeyman, a symbol of the dangers that lurk in the unknown. For example, in one classic tale, a young girl named Vasilisa, the Beautiful, is sent to Baba Yaga's hut by her cruel stepmother and stepsisters, tasked with fetching fire. Terrified but determined, Vasilisa ventures into the woods, protected only by a small magical doll her mother had given her. When she finally reaches the hut on chicken legs, Baba Yaga agrees to give her the fire, but only if Vasilisa can complete a series of grueling chores. She has to separate poppy seeds from dirt, sort good grains from blighted ones, tasks designed to be impossible. But with the help of her magical doll, Vasilisa succeeds. Baba Yaga, though furious, is bound by her word. Instead of a simple flame, she gives Vasilisa a skull from her fence, its eyes blazing with an unholy fire. When Vasilisa brings it home, the skull's fiery gaze incinerates her wicked stepmother and stepsisters, freeing her from their cruelty. In this story, Baba Yaga acts as a harsh but ultimately just force of nature, punishing the wicked and rewarding the virtuous, albeit in a terrifying way. This brings us to her other side. In many other legends, Baba Yaga is not a monster, but a powerful, morally ambiguous figure. She is a wise ancient crone who holds the keys to profound knowledge and magical power. Heroes and heroines on epic quests often seek her out, knowing that she alone can provide the guidance or the magical item they need to succeed. But her help is never given freely. To earn it, one must prove their worth. They need to show courage, cleverness, and a pure heart. She tests them with riddles, challenges their resolve, and scrutinizes their intentions. Those who are respectful, honest, and brave might receive her aid. She might give them a self-guiding ball of yarn to lead them on their path, a flying carpet, or the water of life and death. But those who are rude, foolish, or have ill intentions will face her wrath. So, what is she? A villain or a guide? The truth is, she's both, and that's what makes her so fascinating. She represents the wild, untamable spirit of nature itself, a force that can be both destructive and nurturing. She embodies the archetype of the wild woman, independent, powerful, and living by her own rules, far from the constraints of society. She is a gatekeeper, standing at the threshold between the ordinary world and the realm of magic and spirits. Her origins are as mysterious as she is. Some scholars believe she evolved from an ancient Slavic goddess of death and regeneration, a powerful deity who governed the cycle of life. Her connection to the forest, to animals, and to the elements points to a deep, pre-Christian, pagan heritage. The hut, on chicken legs, might symbolize the link between the world of the living and the spirit world, while her mortar and pestle could be relics of ancient shamanic practices. Over centuries, as Christianity spread, these old goddesses were often demonized, transformed into the witches and monsters of folklore. Baba Yaga might be one of the most enduring examples of this transformation. She retained her immense power, but was recast in a more sinister light, a figure to be feared rather than worshipped. Yet, she never completely lost her dual nature. She remains a complex character who challenges our simple notions of good and evil. She teaches us that wisdom often comes from facing our fears, that power can be found in the most unexpected places, and that the world is far more mysterious than it seems. The legend of Baba Yaga continues to captivate us today. She appears in modern books, films, and video games, constantly being reimagined for new audiences. Sometimes she is a terrifying antagonist, other times a quirky, misunderstood ally. This enduring appeal lies in her complexity. She's not just a monster. She's a symbol of untamed femininity, a keeper of ancient secrets, and a powerful force of nature who demands respect. So, the next time you hear a strange noise in the woods, or see a shadow flit across the moon, you might just think of Baba Yaga. Is she coming to test you, to help you, or to eat you? With her, you never quite know. And that, perhaps, is the most powerful magic of all. She reminds us that the world is full of wonder and danger, and that sometimes the greatest wisdom is found by stepping off the beaten path and daring to knock on the door of a hut that stands on chicken legs. Thank you so much for journeying with me into the dark forests of folklore. If you enjoyed this dive into the legend of Baba Yaga, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure into the world of myths and legends. See you next time.